going to be deep diving into how are you going to practically start thinking about and designing your monitoring, evaluation and learning system. So this video is going to point out or drive home the point that a theory of change helps to show the big, messy, real-world picture, identifying all the different components or the possible pathways that will lead to the change you're expecting, and help you to articulate why you think your activities lead to change. The first thing to remember and to bring back into the discussion is we are starting with a certain result or a certain goal. In this example that we're going to be discussing, the goal or the result of this organization is to increase the utilization of government schemes. So just to give you a little bit of context, in India, or actually in any part of the world, there are several schemes, whether it's healthcare related, education, skilling, employment. There are certain schemes in place to aid the development of vulnerable groups or to improve social service provision. However, a lot of times these schemes do not reach last mile or are not really taken up by the communities that it has been designed for. So now when we start thinking backwards, you would say, okay, what do you need for increased utilization? One is that more of the target group actually applies for these schemes. So increased successful applications. There are more applications to avail of these schemes. Also, on the other hand, or the other side of the same coin, is having improved governance systems and structures to ensure that when applications are made, schemes are deployed down to who apply for these. So there are two sort of things, right? One is successful applications and the second is improved governance structures. Now, for applications to be successful, you need to have more people applying for these schemes. So you need to have more people applying for increased applications. For increased applications, you would definitely need more awareness among these communities or target groups that there are schemes which will help them better their living conditions or improve healthcare access, quality of education, etc. And other than awareness, you also need their capabilities as to how to really navigate through an online platform, what kind of forms to fill in, how to really create certain documentation you need for the schemes, etc. For that to happen, the program has worked backwards. The organization that in this case study worked backwards and said we need these cadre of professionals and this program which will, one, increase awareness about these schemes, and two, is also handhold these target groups or communities to avail of the relevant government schemes. However, in this complex environment, we need to also consider, one is a lot of people in rural India do not have the right documentation. They would not have basics like bank accounts, they would not have social identity cards. So there's a lot of gap in the documentation piece. There's also a gap in the communication piece as to what exactly we should avail of. Secondly, for example, a school is trying to avail of a government scheme for specific funding, say maybe for digital infrastructure, there might not be a relevant scheme. So we also need to consider, or for a target group or women who are widows want to avail of some sort of pension fund, they might not be in that particular district or state, or it's quite complex. So we'd also need to consider, is there an availability of relevant schemes? Even more sort of what comes up a lot, or what came up through this organization's sort of work, was this perception of mistrust, and this community perception of mistrust that I've applied multiple times. I don't think anything's going to come out of this. There's so much corruption. So these perceptions and working with people is always very, very complicated. So trust, perceptions, all of these things also play a role to ensure that it's not only increased applications, or rather it's not only awareness and then capacities and increase in applications, but there's a lot more that goes on into availing of government schemes. When you're looking at the program, you'd also need to consider, like, if this program specifically used technology. So they would go to a particular household in a slum or in a village, and they would take down basic details through an application, and then they would what that application would throw up would be the most relevant schemes for them to improve their quality of life. And the technology at some places also did not function as planned. So they needed to relook at the technology solution. Sometimes, it's great in the boardroom, but when you actually take it down and practically apply these things, a lot of challenges can surface. And of course, the capabilities of your implementation teams. What is their knowledge level? How do they interact with people? How can they, do they have information on the schemes available? Do they have the interpersonal skills to connect with the communities and all of that? So if you just look at this, there's a lot of considerations on just the side of increased successful applications that a theory of change helps you to start thinking about and to recognize. This organization was looking at this piece. Now, an extremely important piece on the other side is improved governance structures. So you might have a lot of people now, the demand for governance schemes increasing exponentially. But at the same time, if the supply and if the government schemes are not availed of even after all these different steps, the program might just fizzle out, because communities are seeing that they're taking all the necessary steps, but still they do not have, or they are not able to utilize the available schemes. So if we look at the improved governance structures, you need management systems. The leadership needs to be sort of more informed, more accountable. Before that, they would need increased funding and investments. The leadership or government officials themselves would need to have capacity building as to what kind of challenges they face to ensure these schemes reach last mile, and maybe that could be done through enhanced public-private dialogue. But the organization here is just looking at this piece. It is sort of not working on this piece for several reasons. One is they don't have the budgets, the capacities. It's also a difficult space to work in when it comes to governance, systems, structures, etc. But at least when we have this big, messy, real-world picture, we'd be able to say why we are achieving results to a certain extent and not more, because we are accounting for the larger environment or the larger ecosystem that the program is operating under. We also should go back to module 1 and say, let's talk change, because there could be so many changes with when we start looking at specifics in housing, in health, in livelihoods, that things in terms of the government schemes, the relevance of the government schemes, or the changes of once you avail of a government scheme, could not just be because of your program when you're looking at other development dimensions. Also, context matters. So when you're working, it might probably be easier to have increased utilization of government schemes in more urban slum communities, as against who have higher education attainment, better understanding, technology access, in comparison to more vulnerable rural communities who don't have all the things that are needed to achieve our results. So what a theory of change will help us do is to answer the question that do we have evidence that all these steps that we are taking are leading to our results, or are these just assumptions and are we leaving out certain very crucial pieces to achieve the goal of our development interventions. In the next video, I'm going to talk about a few more examples and illustrate the different elements of a theory of change. Thank you.